and we commend his spirit into your keeping, O Lord. Reverend, this gathering has not been authorized by the Crestview Meadows HOA Board. The deceased has a balance of $9,500 in unpaid fines, and this service cannot proceed until the estate settles what is owed. I'm also citing a noise violation under Section 8.1. Homeowners Association President Martha Sterling had filed $9,500 in unenforceable fines against Mr. Abernathy of 42 Elmbridge Way over 3 years, citing lawn heights, exterior paint tone, and noise disturbances from a 70-year-old man who lived quietly and alone, and had threatened repeatedly to place a lien on his deed with the Oak Haven County Recorder's Office if the balance was not cleared before the end of each quarter. She had attended every HOA meeting where he pushed back and had matched every objection he raised with another violation noticed the following week. What she didn't know was that every fine she had ever filed against him was documented, photographed, and cross-referenced against the actual bylaws by a son who had been preparing a lawsuit for 18 months. That the community gathering she was about to disrupt was a funeral attended by 40 witnesses, and that kicking a man's coffin in front of that many people was going to end her presidency before the service was over. Mr. Abernathy, 70, had lived at 42 Elmbridge Way in the Crestview Meadows subdivision of Belleville, Ohio, for 22 years. He had bought the house with his late wife, raised his 3 sons inside it, and had maintained it through 2 decades of Ohio summers with the quiet discipline of a man who took pride in what he owned without needing anyone to tell him to. He was retired from a long career in civil engineering, still sharp, still physically capable of mowing his own lawn, and completely unwilling to be told what to do by someone he did not respect. He mowed every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., same routine, same careful straight lines across the front yard, same edged trim along the sidewalk, and his lawn had never once been a genuine problem for anyone on Elmbridge Way. The first fine arrived on a Tuesday in April. It cited grass height exceeding the Crestview Meadows maximum of 3 inches as measured along the front border of his property. The measurement Martha Sterling had recorded on the notice was 3.5 inches. Mr. Abernathy went outside with his own tape measure, checked the grass in 5 separate spots along the front border, and recorded measurements between 2.8 and 3.1 inches. He photographed all 5 measurements, wrote his findings in a letter to the HOA board, and hand-delivered it to the community office on Crestview Meadows Drive the following morning. Then he attended the next quarterly board meeting and said exactly what he thought about it in front of every resident in the room. Martha Sterling, 57, had been HOA president of Crestview Meadows for 8 years and had built her position on the board through a combination of procedural manipulation and the simple fact that most residents found it easier to pay a fine than to fight one. She was not accustomed to being challenged publicly, and she was not accustomed to being challenged by someone who showed up with photographs and a tape measure. She looked at Mr. Abernathy across the meeting room at the Crestview Meadows Community Center on Cedar Crest Drive, and smiled the kind of smile that means nothing good. In the following week, she filed 3 more violation notices against 42 Elmbridge Way. The dispute had found its shape, and neither of them was going to be the one to end it first. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from, and if you believe that harassing a 70-year-old man over half an inch of grass is one of the most shameful things an HOA president can do, hit that like and subscribe button and join us here on HOA Conflicts. Martha did not slow down after that first board meeting. She sped up. Over the following 6 months, she filed 14 separate violation notices against 42 Elmbridge Way, noise complaints against a man who lived alone and kept his television at a volume his neighbors had never once mentioned, aesthetic violations citing the color of his front door, which had not changed in 11 years, and parking infractions for a vehicle parked on his own driveway at an angle she decided was non-compliant. The fines ranged from $200 to $600 each, and the total accumulated against his deed climbed past $9,500 before the end of the year. Mr. Abernathy attended every quarterly board meeting and pushed back on every single one. He came with his photographs, his tape measure readings, his written letters, and his 22 years of property records showing a home that had never once been a genuine problem for the Crestview Meadows community. He was not rude. He was not aggressive. He was simply a 70-year-old man who knew when something was wrong and refused to pretend otherwise. The other residents in those meetings watched him and said nothing, because most of them had already learned that saying nothing was easier than becoming Martha's next target. Mr. Abernathy never paid a single fine, not $1 of the $9,500 that had accumulated against his deed, and not $1 of the additional fines that kept arriving in his mailbox through the winter and into the following spring. He told his son Mitchell during a phone call in February that he had no intention of paying money he did not owe to a woman he did not respect, and that if she wanted to take him to court, she was welcome to try. Mitchell, a civil litigation attorney based in Cleveland, told his father to keep every notice and photograph everything. Mr. Abernathy told him he already was. The fines kept coming through the spring and into summer. Martha escalated her language in each subsequent notice. References to lien filings, references to county assessor involvement, references to foreclosure proceedings that she had no legitimate legal basis to initiate against a property with no mortgage and no genuine debt. Mr. Abernathy filed each notice in a folder he kept on his kitchen table and called Mitchell every time a new one arrived. Then in late August, Mr. Abernathy did not answer his phone when Mitchell called on a Sunday evening. A neighbor found him the following morning. He had passed away peacefully at home overnight. He was 70 years old, and he had not paid a single fine, and he had not given Martha Sterling one moment of satisfaction in 3 years of trying to break him. The neighborhood mourned him. People brought food to his sons. Flowers appeared on the porch of 42 Elmbridge Way without anyone organizing it. The Crestview Meadows Community Center on Cedar Crest Drive went quiet in the way places go quiet when someone genuinely good is no longer in them. Martha Sterling sent a letter to the estate the following week demanding payment of the outstanding balance. The funeral service for Mr. Abernathy was held on a Thursday afternoon at Belleville Heritage Chapel on Monroe Avenue in Oak Haven County. 43 people filled the room. Neighbors from Elmbridge Way, former colleagues, family friends, and all 3 of his sons sitting in the front row. Mitchell sat closest to the aisle, with his hands folded and his jaw set in the way of a man holding himself together through discipline rather than ease. The service had been running for 20 minutes when the door at the back of the room opened. Martha Sterling walked in wearing her HOA lanyard. She stood at the back of the room for a moment and then moved toward the front, clipboard in hand, and announced in a voice loud enough for every person in that chapel to hear that the gathering constituted a Lunder Crestview Meadows community standards, that the assembly had not been authorized by the HOA board, and that the service could not proceed on the grounds that the deceased had been a hostile and non-compliant resident with an outstanding balance of $9,500 in unpaid fines that had not been resolved by the estate. The room went completely silent. Then she walked toward the coffin and kicked it. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Mitchell Abernathy was on his feet before the sound of the impact had finished echoing in the room. He crossed the distance between his seat and where Martha was standing in 2 strides, took her by the arm firmly, walked her to the back of the chapel, and pushed her through the door and onto the sidewalk outside. He did not raise his voice once during any of it. He closed the door behind her, turned to the room, nodded once at the officiant, and sat back down in his seat in the front row. Someone called the police from outside. Someone else was already filming from the moment Martha had walked in. The service continued. Mr. Abernathy was buried with dignity. Mitchell made 3 phone calls before the reception was over. Oak Haven County District Attorney's Office received 3 separate complaints against Martha Sterling within 48 hours of the funeral. One from Mitchell Abernathy filed the same evening. one from the Belleville Heritage Chapel citing disruption of a funeral service, and one from a neighbor who had filmed the entire incident from the moment Martha walked through the door. The footage showed everything: the lanyard, the clipboard, the announcement, and the kick. It was clear, time-stamped, and had been watched over 2 million times online before the week was out. Ohio Penal Code 166.003 makes disruption of a funeral service a Class B misdemeanor. The kick to the coffin added a criminal mischief charge on top of it. Martha was charged with both within 10 days of the service and was photographed at the Oak Haven County courthouse in the same pressed blouse she had worn to every HOA meeting for 8 years, except this time there was no clipboard and no lanyard. Mitchell filed a civil lawsuit the following week. It named Martha personally and the Crestview Meadows HOA board as a collective body. It cited 3 years of fabricated violation notices, harassment of an elderly resident, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the funeral disruption as the culminating act of a sustained campaign of abuse that the board had enabled through consistent inaction. The filing included every violation notice Mr. Abernathy had ever received, every photograph he had taken, every letter he had written, and every board meeting he had attended to dispute fines that should never have been issued. The HOA board removed Martha from the presidency unanimously and issued a public statement the same day expressing condolences to the Abernathy family. It was too late for the statement to help them, and they knew it. The civil judgment came down 4 months later. Martha was ordered to pay damages, legal fees, and a sum the court described as reflecting the severity of what she had done to a man who spent his final years being harassed over half an inch of grass and whose funeral she could not leave in peace. She sold her home on Elmbridge way before the year was out. Mitchell Abernathy mowed his father's lawn the following Saturday morning. Same straight lines, same careful edge trim along the sidewalk. Nobody came to measure it.
If this
story moved you, if it reminded you that some people carry their dignity all the way to the end, no matter what is thrown at them, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have a story about an elderly neighbor, a parent, or a loved one who was targeted by an HOA that had no business doing what it did, drop it in the comments. We will tell that story. See you on the next one, right here on HOA Conflicts.